Been with the faculty since 2003, and it's been my pleasure to work with Soorali Bhatt, who is defending this afternoon. She's been with us since 2013. And I feel like the time has passed so quickly. So it's really with bittersweet feelings that I introduce Soorali's work to you. When Soorali came to us, she actually was a, I want to say, semi-seasoned environmental professional. She already had her bachelor's and her master's degree from a very highly regarded institution in Pune, India. So she came already with a very tremendous skill set. And one of the things that I looked at, I actually went back to your folder. I bet you guys don't know that. We actually go back. We have a folder on everyone. And we look up kind of what you wrote in your statement of purpose initially and what you kind of hope to do and what kind of makes you the person who you are. And Soorali had some comments that she wrote about herself, and also some of her recommenders wrote some comments about her that I thought really resonated and tell you a little bit about the kind of professional and dedicated environmentalist that she is. One thing that she said about herself was that she really had an inner zeal to learn things. And first of all, I love anybody who will use the word zeal. I thought that was amazing. And that she's very interested in understanding global environmental issues. And that's exactly what she did in the course of conducting her thesis research, which you're going to find out about. And the other aspect of Soorali's personality, I like so many aspects of her personality, and I'm sad that she's leaving us, but I do feel that one of her kind of most outstanding characteristics is that she is just she's an incessant learner. She's so open to new experiences. She actually was one of the brave graduate students that participated in the Environmental Resource Center, which is our main peer-to-peer outreach entity for the university. And a lot of times people see that as kind of an undergraduate thing, but she kind of jumped right in and found out about community organizing. I really appreciated that. She was a TA for me in Introduction to Environmental Issues, and that was a new experience for her.
Absolutely.
Really going from, I think the Indian educational system is very different than what we have in the United States. And so I think that was a great learning experience for her. And I've learned a lot from Soorali as well. But it's been a wonderful time together. I look forward to working with Soorali when she's a professional, working in the tech industry, and can make donations to our department. We'll all be working for her someday. So please join me in welcoming Soorali Bhatt and hearing all about her, the good work that she did.
Thank you. Okay. So maybe they would settle down. Okay. So welcome to my thesis defense today. I'll begin with introducing me. My name is Soorali Bhatt, and I'm defending my master's thesis on the topic Silicon Revolution, Sustainability Disclosures and Performance in the Semiconductor Manufacturing Industry from the year 2010 to 2014. I'll begin my presentation by thanking my thesis committee members, Dr. Catherine Cushing, Dr. Dustin Mulvaney, and Mr. Bruce Klafter, without whose inputs this research would not have been possible at all. I also thank my survey and interview participants for sharing valuable insights about the sustainabilities of their sustainability departments, and also the overall understanding about how they go about in the sustainability initiatives. I also like to thank my family for their support throughout the 3 years of my master's thesis. So this research is divided into 4 main categories. We start with the introduction, then move on to the methods, then to the findings, and finally we finish off with the discussion and recommendations. So basically, what is the semiconductor industry? So let us start with what is a semiconductor. A semiconductor is a compound which has properties in between a conductor and an insulator, and this unique property makes the semiconductor a good medium for control of electric current. Semiconductors today mean chips, microchips, and integrated circuits that store and process information. The chip is a backbone of almost every industry today which uses electronic based devices. So why is this study important to me? So basically the semiconductor manufacturing process is a very intense, resource intensive process, and it also causes severe pollution, and in addition to that it has severe impacts on the society. And in spite of these facts, there hasn't been much study about the sustainability of this industry. And to fill this gap in research, I have started working on this. I started with this research process. So we start with the birth of the industry in the Silicon Valley. During the 1930s and 40s, the Santa Clara Valley, which initially had the orchards, it changed from the orchards to semiconductor manufacturing startups. And this continued until as we can see from this graph over here, that continued until the mid 1990s, and at the same time Japan entered this space. But during the 1990s, different Asian countries such as Korea, Taiwan and China entered this manufacturing space, and mostly the manufacturing units that were in the Silicon Valley were outsourced to these Asian countries because of the low manufacturing costs. There were a number of changes in the business models of the manufacturing units that initially started in the silicon industry, in the Silicon Valley, where three different types of companies were born, which are integrated chip manufacturers, fabless companies, and foundries. Moving further, here are some environmental impacts of this industry. As you can see from this picture over here, an integrated chip is even tinier than our fingernail, and there are around hundreds of such tiny chips into a typical that go into the working of a typical laptop. So we can understand, for manufacturing this tiny chip, it requires around 32,000 liters of water, 1600 grams of secondary fossil fuels, 72 grams of chemicals, and 700 grams of elemental gases. So basically these values are from the year 2002, but over the past 14 years there have been tremendous changes in the complexity of these chips, and as a result more inputs are required for manufacturing the same chip today. So why does this industry require so much of input? Or the reason for that is that the manufacture of chips requires ultra pure water during the different stages of manufacturing, and generally 4 gallons of regular water yields 2.5 gallons of ultra pure water. Also, the clean rooms which are required in the manufacturing process, there is a need to maintain sterile conditions and maintaining these sterile conditions requires tremendous energy for the airflow equipments. In addition, it is also said that around 300 chemicals can go into manufacture of this tiny chip, of which many of them are hazardous. There are also some social impacts associated with this industry. There have been increasing incidences of miscarriages and cancers that are observed in the workers from this industry, and also the incident of trichloroethane and trichloromethane leaching during 1981 from one of the semiconductor manufacturing units in San Jose, that resulted into birth defects in the nearby population. Even in 2016, the EICC, which is the organization in the electronics industry space that introduces industry-wide standards on social, environmental, and ethical issues, they have mentioned that even today the industry is challenged by non-standard working hours, and also some incidences of forced labor are observed. As we all know, there are a number of different approaches to addressing sustainability in this industry, but my research addresses it through the analysis of sustainability reports. But this research is by no means an alternative to regulatory compliance. Now we see the evolution of sustainability reporting. So basically the term sustainability was popularized in 1987 from the term sustainable development, which was defined as the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. In this, the Brundtland report was in the forefront in describing this concept of sustainable development. And this report described that sustainable development cannot only be achieved by the government regulators and policy makers, but it also requires the active participation of corporations, which play an important role in the economic development of the society. And as a result, in 1992, the World Business Council on Sustainable Development first addressed the topic of corporate sustainability that bridges the gap between the role of corporations in sustainable development. So as the concerns of stakeholders over over understanding the environmental and social impacts of these organizations grew, corporate entities began to publish sustainability reports, and so as to provide a standardized format on what information needs to go into these sustainability reports, organizations such as the ISO, SASB, and GRI began to publish sustainability reporting guidelines. Today, the GRI is the most comprehensive and popular sustainability guideline available, and hence I have based my research on the GRI guidelines. All the previous information lays the background for the study on sustainability in the semiconductor industry. So moving on to the related research. My study is divided into three different aspects. First is report completeness. The second one is reporting is sustainability performance and motivation behind reporting. Please refer to the handouts for the details of this slide because they might not be as readable as shown. So this is the handout. And I referred the study. Okay, let's just wait for a minute.
Maybe we could do the wrong one. Oh, thanks.
Okay, so I referred the study by Daub, who conducted the study of data disclosures in 76 Swiss companies. And the analysis was based on 33 different parameters, as you can see from this table over here, which were divided into 4 broad categories, which are context and coverage, which covered the company's profile and the overall business profile of the company. Then the second was policy management systems and stakeholder relations, which usually covered the code of conduct and the economic and basically everything related to the policies. The third one was dimensions of performance, which covered economic, environmental, social, and integrated performance. And the last category was transparency and general view, which covered the transparency and the overall quality of the data that was presented in the reports. Moving further, here are some merits and demerits of the study by Daub. The study was the first of its kind to develop a sustainability matrix for understanding the disclosure levels in the sustainability reports. Also, during the interviews that were conducted by this team, they found that disclosing data about social and environmental aspects was really difficult with respect to the data gathering and also publishing it in the reports. There were also certain shortcomings of this study, such as this study was multi-sectoral. So it is really not fair to compare a bank with a company from the oil and gas industry, because basically their impacts are completely different. Then this study only covered the large companies from Switzerland. And thirdly, this analysis was only assessed the it only assessed the sustainability disclosures and nothing about sustainability performance was found in this study. So, therefore, there was a necessity to investigate the sustainability performance, and I based this assessment based on two factors, which is adoption of best practices and analysis of historical, environmental and social data trends from 2010 to 2014. So the analysis for understanding the best practices that were specific to the semiconductor industry, I referred three studies, the one by Zhu, SASB and EICC. And basically, what are best practices? So best practices are a key to the firm's performance, and they help the companies to achieve these goals. So these best practices ranged from the mandatory ones such as product compliance certifications such as REACH, ROS, WE, etc., to the voluntary ones which such as reusable packaging and green transportation. But it was found that mere adoption of these best practices won't give a complete picture about the sustainability performance of the company, and therefore more data analysis was critical. I found that normalized data, absolute data, and historical trends data, all three of this data is important for understanding the sustainability performance, as normalized data gives a apple-to-apple comparison between the companies, while absolute data represents overall resource use and its impacts. Historical data, on the other hand, gives the reader an overall perspective of the past and present approach to environment and social aspects, but it may not guarantee future success. Therefore, in addition to that, several researchers have assessed the relationship between sustainability performance and report completeness, but they found mixed results, and they definitely do not show a finite direction in this space. Then, with respect to understanding the motivating factors for behind sustainability reporting, there have been tremendous study on this topic for that has been done for different industries, of which I found that green brand reputation and stakeholder pressures are the key drivers. Also, there was a study conducted by Bruceman who described, as we can see in this flow chart over here, he described that the stages of sustainability adoption is usually a linear process that starts with sustainability from a regulatory standpoint. So basically companies adopt sustainable practices because they are mandated by some regulation. And further, as these practices mature in the company, they incorporate sustainability into their supply chains, then further develop sustainable products, then develop new models such that sustainability is at the center point. And lastly, they develop groundbreaking ideas that are brought for the next generation technologies. So based on these studies, three research questions are formulated, which are: what are the key factors that motivate adoption of sustainability reporting in the sample semiconductor manufacturing companies? The second one is: how complete is the publicly available disclosure data presented in the corporate sustainability reports? And the third one is: how do the companies perform based on adoption of sustainability best practices and analysis of patterns in social and environmental data from 2010 to 2014? Now we move on to the next section, which is the method section. So basically, for the sample, 20 different companies that were spread globally were selected, such that these companies were either integrated chip manufacturers or foundries, because the manufacturing impacts are of importance to this research. Then the sustainability reports of the companies were studied such that they contained data on social and environmental aspects from 2010 to 2014. Then the table over here enlists the 20 companies, and pseudonyms have been used so as to maintain anonymity. The sample consisted of companies that had a lot of variation with respect to their market cap, then their annual net revenue, and also with respect to the number of employees. So which were the data sources that were analyzed? So for the document review, I analyzed the sustainability reports, the websites, and some other documents that were related for this study. And this study was undertaken during August to October of 2015. Then I studied 40 sustainability reports, 20 websites, and 5 other documents. And the sustainability reports were such that they were as small as 14-page reports to as big as 150 pages. Then telephonic interviews were conducted during August and October of 2015. And usually each interview took place for around 45 to 50 minutes. Surveys were also conducted during the month of September and October of 2015. So moving on to the first methods that assess completeness of sustainability reporting. As we saw earlier, the 33 parameters that were based on the GRI guidelines, they were split into 3 broad categories, which is overall strategic disclosures, environmental disclosures, and social disclosures. So as you can see, the overall strategic disclosure category has 33.4 points. So this category has much lesser weight as compared to the environmental and social disclosures, because this information is traditionally represented by the companies in their annual reports. So basically, the 33 different parameters were graded from 0 to 3 for each company, such that 0 meant that no information about the parameter was described in the report, whereas 3 meant that good qualitative and quantitative information along with historical trends were presented. For assessing the sustainability performance based on the best practice adoption, the 28 best, so the number of best practices in each company were noted out of 28, and this formed the basis for this analysis. Then the next study involves assessing sustainability performance based on historical data. So normalized data for energy use, waste generation, water consumption, GHG emissions, and other air emissions was analyzed from 2010 to 2014, whereas descriptive data for ecological responsibility was analyzed over the same period. In addition to that, the social impacts were assessed using absolute data and descriptive data on topics such as investments, donations, and activities that are undertaken by the companies. Lastly, surveys and interviews were also conducted. From the past research, I found that there are around 10 important motivations that guide sustainability reporting in any company, and the companies were asked to grade these 10 motivations over a grading of 1 to 5, where 1 meant they completely disagreed and 5 meant they completely agreed. In addition to the document review and the surveys, I also conducted interviews with sustainability managers from selected sample companies, and these interviews were over the telephone, and they were semi-structured. Now moving on to the findings. With respect to research question 1, all the 20 sample companies were contacted for participating in the survey, of which 10 agreed, and as a result the participation rate was 50%. From the surveys, I found that ethical responsibility and concerns for the environment and society were noted to be the key motivations for reporting in this industry. And in addition to that, a large number of participants also mentioned that if they publish reports, it increased their stock value as they were included in different sustainability indices. Additionally, competitive advantage was also mentioned to be one of the motivating factors for sustainability reporting. So this is an interview from one of the manager that I interviewed, and she mentioned that adopting sustainability practices and reporting are two completely different aspects of sustainability. On analysis of the sustainability reports, I found that the adoption rate of GRI guidelines in the reports was really high, as around 16 out of the 20 companies had adopted the GRI guidelines, as you can see in this graph. In contrast, the practice of seeking third-party assurance to the data that is represented in the reports was not that common in the reports, even though it added credibility to the data that was presented. Further, let us consider this the calculations for company AD, for which are based on the modified sustainability matrix. The total sustainability score was divided into four categories that we saw earlier, which is overall strategic, environmental disclosures, and social disclosures. So let us consider the example of overall strategic. The company received 50 points out of possible 66 points, and these were normalized on a scale of 33.4, and as a result the points received for the overall strategic disclosures is 25.3 for company AD. Similar calculations were conducted for the environmental and social disclosures, and as a result, the total sustainability score of the company AD was 70.5 out of 100. Same calculations were conducted for the other 19 companies, and I found that the maximum disclosure score was 96.6 out of 100, while the minimum score was 48.4. Therefore, based on the scores, I found that companies which disclosed a lot of information had similar characteristics, and therefore I called this group as progressive group. Whereas the companies that disclosed limited information in their reports, it was called as the developing group. Each group of companies, each group, that is the developing group and the progressive group, consisted of 4 to 6 different companies, and the remaining companies from the sample did not show any distinct characteristics. Here we discuss the distinguishing factors in the progressive group and the developing group. So as we can see from this table over here, the progressive group was into sustainability reporting for a very long time as compared to the developing group, and this could be the reason for the maturity of their sustainability reports. Also, the approach to sustainability in the progressive group was quite comprehensive as compared to the developing group. So by comprehensive, I mean that the companies adopted different projects on waste reduction, water recycling and reduction, ultra pure water reuse, among others. So basically all the different aspects of environment were addressed simultaneously, whereas in the developing group they just chose 2 or 3 different aspects. So for example, waste reduction and GHG emissions. So there wasn't a comprehensive approach to environment in the developing group. Further, with respect to the social disclosures, I found that the progressive group had very detailed information about their social initiatives, and also this information was supported by appropriate graphics, which not only made the content understandable, but they also increased the aesthetic appeal of the report. In contrast, the developing group showed their social contributions through photographs of employee volunteering. Secondly, the emphasis of social initiatives in the progressive group was more towards educational collaborations, such as STEM education, scholarships, employee training, girl-child education, etc. Whereas in the developing group, they were more into employee volunteering and charitable donations. In addition, the progressive group had described historical data about the EHS rates or the number of hours their employees volunteered, etc. But this information was usually absent in the developing group companies. Next, with respect to the overall strategic and total disclosures, usually the economic, environmental, and social policies of a company, they mirror the company's business philosophy. And I found that the Progressive Group had a very descriptive and detailed approach to these policies in the reports. And whereas in the Developing Group, they had a very limited information, maybe a line or two about these policies. Then with respect to involving stakeholders in identifying the sustainability priorities, the Progressive Group interviewed stakeholders to understand the concerns about the company's operations, whereas this process of involving stakeholders was usually absent in the Developing Group. Then from the interviews that I conducted with the sustainability managers, I found that in the Progressive Group, there was usually in these type of companies, there was a person who guided the sustainability initiatives and reporting in the company for a very long time. But as none of the Developing Group companies agreed to participate in the interview, this aspect is really not known. Then the reports of the Progressive Group were very comprehensive and detailed, whereas in the Developing Group, their reports were mostly like product brochures with some information about environment and social aspects. Moving on to the next analysis, which is sustainability performance based on best practices. Refer to your handout, page number 3. So this is the figure this is the table that you'll have to refer. So basically these are the 28 best practices that we saw earlier, and the green blocks over here indicate that the company had adopted the best practices, whereas the white blocks indicate that the best practice was absent in that company. So as you can see, the Progressive Group has more greens, so they have adopted more best practices as opposite to the Developing Group, which has adopted much lesser best practices. So let's consider the company IT. This company has adopted 22 best practices, as you can see from this table over here, whereas the company SO has adopted the least best practices, as you can see from this table over here. Now let's discuss the findings. So basically, as we saw earlier, IT was the company which has adopted 22 best practices out of 28. And some of the distinguishing features of this company are that it was the only company from the sample that had set goals for social well-being in its long-term strategy. Also, the company had linked customers, the results of customer survey with the bonus of its employees, right from the ground staff to its CEOs. And also, this was the only company that presented data about the fines and violations that were imposed on them. In contrast, SO and SC were the two companies that had adopted the least practices, like the ones that we saw from the table earlier. And some other distinguishing examples based on these best practices is that TK, a sample company, had prioritized product sustainability over the traditional waste, water, energy reduction approach. Also, MR, a sample company, had a very advanced approach to ecological responsibility, where they had raised a man-made forest at two of their manufacturing facilities. So let's discuss the highlights from the Developing Group and the Progressive Group with respect to the adoption of best practices. So in the Developing Group, they had mostly adopted best practices that were from a regulatory standpoint, such as product certifications like REACH, ROS, PFOS, and V. Also, they had a human rights policy, and according to the Dodd-Frank rule of 2010, companies are mandated to report their sources of 4 chemicals, which are tantalum, tin, gold, and tungsten in their SEC reports. Also, the approach to sustainability was quite basic in these companies, as they just had a EHS department and a sustainability department in addition to EHS policy and a sustainability strategy in place. The developing group had adopted only the basic ISO certifications such as ISO 14001 and 18001. In addition to the best practices that were adopted by the developing group, the progressive group had a very advanced approach to sustainability in their supply chains. Then this group had adopted advanced ISO certifications such as the GHG related certifications such as ISO 14064 or the PAS 2050, in addition to energy management certifications such as ISO 50001. Even though these certifications do not guarantee sustainability performance, but they definitely put in place a management system for improving performance. The progressive group also was in the forefront in replacing the ozone depleting substances with alternatives that were less destructive. Moving on to the third analysis, which is based on the which is the sustainability performance based on the historical data. On analysis of the data from the year 2010 to 2014, I found that there were 4 trends that were commonly observed, which is decrease, increase, mixed, and new normal. So basically, these trends. If the data from 3 or more companies followed the same pattern over the 5 years, it was called as a trend. But the magnitude of improvement or decrease is not presented in the trend. So, for example, if a company has decreased its total water consumption by 1%, and the other company may have decreased it by 20%. It is a rough measure of the underlying resource use and emissions trends. I'll discuss each trend in further detail in the next slides. So this is the Scope 1 GHG emissions trend for companies TC and UC. So by Scope 1, it is meant that the GHG emissions that are as a result of the manufacturing processes. As you can see on the primary axis, the values are in tons CO2 per wafer meter square, whereas on the secondary axis, the values are in tons CO2 per 8 inch of equivalent layer. So as you can see, there is a decrease over the 5 years. In the second trend, which is for the hazardous waste production in company AD and GF, the y-axis gives the hazardous waste normalized hazardous waste production in grams per centimeter square of silicon wafer fab, and as you can see, there is an increase over the years. Further, the data that I analyzed had a interesting trend which I called as the new normal. And as you can see from the data on GHG emissions for the companies SC, NN and NV, in the initial 3 years, the company followed a haphazard pattern, whereas in the latter 2 years, that is 2013 and 14, there is the companies reached a plateau, and this plateau could be of interest for the companies to address further reductions, and this plateau values or the stabilized values could be used by the company for further reductions in their emissions and resource use. There were also certain observations in the social trends. So basically, the charitable donations, investments in employee training, OSHA incidence and severity rates, and the percentage of women and employees with disabilities have shown an increase from 2010 to 2014. Based on the improvements or deterioration with respect to the social and environmental aspects over the 5 years, the companies were divided in two groups, which is progressive group and developing group, like so. So basically, the biggest question remains, that is, what is the relationship between the report completeness and sustainability performance? So this is like the crux of my research, and this table summarizes all the three analyses that I conducted for this research. The yellow blocks indicate that the companies were led with respect to sustainability disclosures and also sustainability performance with respect to either trends analysis from 2010 to 2014 or with respect to best practice adoption. Then the blue blocks indicate that the companies lagged with respect to social disclosures and with respect to sustainability performance in either of the two criterias. Whereas the gray blocks indicate that the companies lagged with respect to sustainability disclosures, but they performed well with respect to sustainability performance. Therefore, based on the yellow blocks and the blue blocks, we can say that there is a positive association between sustainability disclosures and sustainability performance. But even though the causation between the two is not, it is not possible to find the causation between the two based on the available data. So moving on to the last section of my presentation, that is discussion. For research question 1, I found that ethical reasons and concerns about the society and environment were the driving factors for sustainability reporting in the sample 20 companies. But past researchers have stressed that companies report on sustainability so as to be recognized as a green brand, or because they report as a response to the stakeholder pressures. With respect to research question 2, which was targeted to find the report completeness, I found that the approach to managing environment was more sophisticated than social aspects, and also the companies decided the coverage and the depth of the data to be presented in the reports. For research question 3, that was about sustainability performance, I found that the projects on GHG emission reduction, increasing energy intensity and waste production were highly prioritized by the companies as compared to water reduction projects, even though most of the manufacturing facilities were located in water-starved regions. Also, the topic of biodiversity was not very well described by the companies, and nothing beyond planting trees was done by most of the companies. Then, as we saw from the trends analysis, there was an improvement in the social contributions, whereas the environmental resource use and emissions followed mixed trends. Educational collaborations with schools and colleges, along with investments in employee volunteering, were the common programs for social involvement. And as we saw earlier, I found a positive relationship between report completeness and sustainability performance, and these findings are consistent with some researchers such as Al-Tuwajri, while contradict the findings of others such as Patton. As we saw earlier, Bruce Munn had described that the process of sustainability adoption in a company is usually a linear process. But from the reports that I studied and the interviews that I conducted, I found that it was somewhat like this, where the companies usually decided at what point or what stage they wanted to incorporate sustainability. For example, TK, a sample company, had directly started with sustainable products as opposed to starting sustainability from a compliance standpoint. And finally, here are some recommendations. The pattern of new normal needs to be further investigated. And also at present, the practice of sustainability reporting is a voluntary practice. But if there is some mandate on publishing reports, companies might publish reports that are good in quality, and also if they could just standardize the data and the units in which the data is published. Thirdly, if companies are provided with some financial incentive for publishing reports containing good information, companies may be tempted to disclose more information in their reports. And lastly, from the interviews, I found that the process of reporting usually takes about 5 to 6 months. And if a standard template is developed, companies could directly make the pertinent information available to their stakeholders easily. Here are some of the references that I referred. And with this, I conclude my talk. Thank you.
So for those of you that haven't been to a defense yet, I'll talk a little bit about procedure. First, we take questions from the committee members. Then we take questions from the public. Then the committee will kind of go outside in the hall and have a little meeting, and then we come back. So that's kind of how it works. If you would mind holding on to your questions for just a little bit, I'd like to open up to committee members, Bruce and Dustin. You guys wanted to start us off with any questions that you have first, Raleigh?
I'll start off with a question. So one of the challenges I think often with a lot of the data disclosures is that it often lacks context for where things are occurring. So you might be reporting on water use, but there's no way to interpret whether that water is being used in a water-stressed region or an area where water is not really of concern. So I'm not sure how to phrase this quite as a question, but did you come across any kind of tensions in trying to parse out where you might make distinctions about where is it important and where is it not important to bring context in for not maybe just water use, but for many others. Of course, greenhouse gas emissions is a global environmental problem, doesn't really matter, but with some of these other ones, it could. So, yeah, so how do we bring kind of, I guess, context to some of these reporting numbers?
So maybe there could be certain reporting criteria. For example, I found that a company had adopted 181 projects for reducing their energy impacts, and this had also reduced costs, as well as they had offset a considerable amount of GHG emissions. So maybe just tying up the different metrics that could, I think that would solve the problem.
I'm kind of interested in the progressive group. Did that include both integrated companies and foundries, or were they mostly integrated companies?
It just depended on what matrix they had. So, for example, a leading foundry did not have much of their performance wasn't that great with respect to the environmental trends that had studied over 2010, but they were really in the forefront with respect to the best practices that they adopted.
How about the influence of geography? So Taiwanese headquartered companies versus other regions.
So basically, that was that would be like I would consider that aspect, because right now the companies do not have a specificity with respect to geographic locations, because there are like 5 companies from the US, 5 are from Taiwan, whereas 1 or 2 are from China. So basically, it doesn't give a good. It isn't fair that based on the available data to say that companies in the US are the best, because that's like a limited set of companies that I've studied. So yeah, but generally the Taiwanese companies led with the environmental aspects.
So I see that they, in some of the data, they normalize the data. Is that based on the amount of produced, the amount of products sold, the amount of product attempted to be manufactured? Like how, and is there kind of a standard framework for how to normalize these data for the different, across the different manufacturers?
It was mostly the product manufactured, and it was with respect to either the chips that they produced or with respect to the wafer volume that they used in the production.
Okay, so it's based on the amount of feedstock,
Feeds.
essentially.
For a wafer, it would be the amount of feedstock, but for the chips, it's the final product that was produced.
Okay, doesn't that creates problems though, right? In
Right.
interpretation.
That's what. So from the normalized data, there isn't a standard in finding what, like for example, water with respect to chip, or say water with respect to wafer. So it might just differ. So there has to be some standardization in which units you have to calculate the data.
And are these, I mean, I know GRI has kind of stakeholder groups.
Mm-hmm.
They have, from what I understand, I don't follow that closely, but they kind of facilitate how to go about harmonizing or standardizing the rules. Or is that
Right.
part of that conversation?
They don't talk much about the units as such. So based on the data that I analyzed, there's not much about. There was just one company who mentioned manufacturing index. They said that this should be standardized by, this should be used by the other companies so as to standardize the ways in which they represent their data. But that was just one company that I found.
And maybe this brings us to my question, which is, when we were looking at the data, we saw a lot of noise. It's very noisy in there. So even to identify 2 or 3 companies where you see that you can even compare units with each other and that you can see any kind of discernible trend is really a challenge. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. And then if you had recommendations for the industry in terms of what's next, because if you all can look at your best practices, there's a lot, right? There's 36 here. So if you had to prioritize some of those based on what you learned from spending all that quality time with the reports, which ones would you prioritize? So I guess it's 2 questions. One is speak to the noise and how you went about finding trends, and then the second one would be talking about prioritization of best practices.
Okay, so speaking about the noise, I would say there has to be some standardization in what type of data the companies maybe they gather, and in the way they make it publicly available. And from the interviews, I found that the companies find it really hard to gather the data and also to report it. So basically, maybe that could be the reason why there's a lot of noise, because the data gathering is really difficult. And with respect to the second question about the best practices, I would say that the materiality analysis for sustainability, key performance indicators identification, so that basically ties up the views of the stakeholders with the priorities from the company. So that could be something that companies should decide and then prioritize what needs to be done. But in my understanding, I would say that the companies should stress more on the social aspects of their operations, because environment has been studied for a very long time. So I would say that.
And I also think that one thing that we had talked about in our analysis of the data is that companies, when they think about social responsibility, sometimes they think of things far afield from like their actual manufacturing sites. And I thought that was really kind of an interesting observation.
Right.
Because it's a very resource intense, high energy, high water use, high emissions, and so you would think that intuitively maybe they would do more locally, but actually it doesn't seem like that's so much the case. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and they just go with the flow. So like what the measures the other companies are taking, they just incorporate those or something like that. Yeah.
Great.
Do the progressive group actors, do they have a different organizational structure, or does the sustainability person sit in a different part of that company, or have maybe a direct line to the CEO or something like that? Is there is there something else about the way that the companies are governed that might help explain why they're progressive companies?
So from the people that I interviewed for, most of them were from the progressive group, and I found that they had a very high position in the organizational structure. So they were maybe just below the CEO. So they had a very they saw sustainability from a very vantage point, and they knew what has to be done from that point. So but there wasn't much of organizational change as such, or something typical in the companies that were progressive or the others which were developing. It was just the position or the experience that the person had.
Were the developing group folks, were they maybe under-resourced, or?
That could be one of the reasons, but based on the report analysis, I wouldn't be able to say much about that. If one or two companies might have participated in the interview, that could have added some insight to this.
And could you go to slide 19? You have a quote on there that I'd like you to explain.
This one.
Yeah, down the bottom. We often do things for different reasons. The reporting aspect is not that drives our action in space.
Right.
Yeah, what does that mean?
So I asked the manager that did you do sustainability initiatives because you wanted to report that, or what was the reason behind that? So she mentioned that reporting is just like a byproduct of our the projects that we undertake, but that doesn't drive any of the sustainability strategy in our company.
But what does though?
It just depends on what the company prioritizes at that time, or maybe the resources available, or the money maybe. Yeah, but I'm not sure about that though. But this is what she mentioned.
What do you think of that? Do you think that that's? You prefaced a lot of this for. I mean, in our conversation, we have to kind of put this all in context, right? We have the corporate social responsibility is one way of addressing this problem.
Right.
And we've had other ways of dealing with it, which is actually enforcing standards
Regulations.
that exist, passing new regulations and things like that. What does that quote tell you kind of in that context?
I would say it is mostly voluntarily that the companies undertake these initiatives, and it is also a voluntary practice that they report about it. So this is what I think.
So let me rephrase the question then. Do you think voluntary environmental policies like CSR initiatives help solve the problems that the semiconductor industry creates?
Not really, because since it is voluntary, the company decides on what they want to do. Whereas if it is a regulatory practice, they will do it. So, for example, the product certification such as RoHS, WEEE. So, if the company has to do business in certain areas, so they have to get these certifications. So, it's like if there's a mandate, you do it. This is what I saw from the sample. Yeah. So, mandation would be better.
And then I think something that might help clarify in the final thesis, Dustin, and maybe you could make note of this, Raleigh, is to distinguish between the disclosure, right, motivation for disclosing information versus why do we do these sustainability practices in the first place, because those are.
So I can add a
very
bit on
different
that.
things.
I can add a bit on that. So
Okay.
I initially thought that reporting and adopting the best practices, they were motivated by the same thing. But from the interviews, it was said that cost savings is a big factor in adopting the sustainability initiatives. But it is not it is not a motivation for reporting. It is not associated with that.
One other, I'm wondering how many of the companies in your samples had third-party verification of their reports or the data, and whether you found a material difference in the quality of the reports, and or their performance from one to the other.
So basically, the assurance was mostly for GHG initiatives. They had quantified the GHG, the emissions.
Just that parameter?
Yeah, mostly GHG was the most common one.
Okay.
One more question.
yeah, sure.
Could you go to slide 34? What do you mean by sophisticated here?
By sophisticated, I mean that they were addressed in much detail, and they had a comprehensive approach to it. Whereas social aspects, they just did like some volunteering here, then some contributions or donations over there. So it was just like picking and choosing. But for environment, they did it much in detail.
So, for example, well, I guess the way I think about social aspects in GRI, there are categories about like,
Human rights.
trafficking and,
Right.
and human rights and things like that. So you're just saying that they're somewhat abstract. I mean, it seems like they could have very concrete things to say there too,
With respect to GRI?
with respect to some of the reporting categories in GRI. So, do you use whatever forced labor or something like that? It seems that that could be concrete also. So
But again, that's voluntary. So
voluntary.
it's not
okay, I see.
necessary for the company to mention it.
Right, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we
Any more questions?
Okay, yeah, I think we have maybe just time for 3 questions. Anybody? Yeah, Colin.
Sure.
In your discussion, you had mentioned that you'd like to see this style of report